Om Shri Sai Ram, offering humble salutations at the divine lotus feet of Bhagavan Sri Satya Sai Baba. Let us commence today's session with Sai Gayatri. Om Saishwaraya Vidmahe Satyadevaya Dhimahi Tanna Sarva Prachodayat. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. A hearty welcome to one and all to the 11th episode of Prema Pravaham Connect to Reconnect series. Greetings to all for the recently celebrated Varalakshmi and Onam festivals. In one of the discourses, Swami had said that Goddess Lakshmi is the one who resides in the heart or the Vakshasthala of Lord Vishnu or Lord Narayana in Vaikuntha. For reaching this Vaikuntha or for attaining Paramapadam, it is Goddess Lakshmi who has to open the door, unveiling the Maya or ignorance in us. And how is it possible to push aside the vagaries of the mind and the distractions of the world to attain this Paramapadam? By constant prayer and remembrance of the glories of the Lord, by being aware of God's presence always within us. In this attempt to help us reconnect with divinity, we have two wonderful alumni speakers this evening. The first speaker is Sister Krishna Subhaga, an alumnus of Sri Satya Sai Institute of Higher Learning, Anantapur campus. Sister Krishna did her undergrad in commerce and pursued a corporate career as a techie in Oracle for close to a decade and a half. Hailing from a family of Sai devotees, Sister Krishna practiced the principle of servitude right from her college days. Being my immediate senior at college, I have seen her working with a lot of sincerity and dedication in all the tasks assigned to her till date. While working in Oracle, she also was serving as a volunteer in the Medical Records Division of Sri Satya Sai Institute of Higher Medical Sciences, Whitefield. She is known for spearheading many medical camps with a lot of meticulousness. Upon divine command, she moved to Mudinhalli in 2015 and has been working there since then. Currently, she is one of the trustees of the Each One Educate One Foundation and is the administrative manager of the Prashanti Balamandira Trust. She reflects the thoughts of the great novelist and poet Charlotte Bronte, who said, "The leader God is just as well as mighty. And while he has chosen a feeble instrument to perform a task, he will, from the boundless store of his providence, supply the means to the end. Fix your heart on the Maker, and you will be ready to do at once whatever furthers that end." Requesting the participants to reserve their questions for the end of the session and to type them in the chat box. Then over to Sister Krishna, who will be addressing us today on the topic Marching On with a Purpose. Welcome, Krishnaka. Era.
Dearest Swami, loving pranams, I pray that you speak through me today. Revered elders, brothers and sisters, Sairam to everybody. Thank you, Vidya, for that very flowery introduction. I just thought I'll share my journey to Swami in the beginning before I share my experiences. So my mother was very instrumental in bringing me to Swami, and she remembers taking me to Puttaparthi when I was around the age of 2 for Shivratri Lingodbhavam. Of course, I don't have any active memory about that visit. But she put me into the Bal Vikas courses, and very happily every Saturday I remember going attending these Bal Vikas classes in Bangalore in my guru's home, Mrs. Radha Rukmini, who is no more now. Um, and being the determined lady that my mother is, she found out how I could become a Swami student. And she said that I could apply in Puttaparthi for my 8th standard. And I was very excited about it. And we applied, and I went for the entrance exam. But we didn't know that the boards of education was different in Puttaparthi, and they followed the central board, and I was studying in the state board. The standard of Hindi, the subject Hindi language was very high, and I couldn't do very well in that paper. And there was a paper on Sanskrit which I didn't have any exposure to at all in my school. So I didn't get through the tests, and we came back home quite disappointed. But only with renewed vigor that I should somehow join Swami's institutions, at least in my 11th grade in Anandpur. So when it was time for the when I finished the 10th grade, I applied in Anandpur, and by Swami's grace, I got through, and I joined the Sri Satya Sai Arts and Science Junior College for Women for my 11th grade, and it was called Intermediate in Andhra Pradesh. And it was like fish taking to water. And when I joined the hostel, I didn't miss home at all. I was extremely happy to stay in the hostel. And I finished my
Sarah, with your sister, we are not able to connect to Krishna sister, is it?
Yes, yes. While we wait for Krishna Kat, I wanted to tell you, like, I've seen her, working in the campus also in close quarters. Actually, she used to take care of some of our sisters who were sick. She used to be working in the pharmacy. There was a team, but she was very quick to act right from, so it's like almost I know her since 25 years plus. So it's been really wonderful knowing Sister Krishna. And, Swami has many times told us to take her as an example in terms of her hard work. Okay, Krishna Ka, welcome back.
sorry, there's been very intermittent internet connection today. I'm sorry about that.
That's fine.
Yeah, so I
So you
joined
might just one request. You might want to put the video off if your bandwidth connectivity is low. Right. Anyway, why don't you carry on? If it happens again, then you can probably try that. Yeah.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So I joined the Anantapur campus in the year 1990, and I um, and I studied there for 5 years, did my intermediate, and then went on to complete my bachelor's in commerce. Um, there were two occasions that I remember very distinctly as a student that I had an opportunity to interact with Swami. And both were in my very first year. Um, so there was this tradition and as Anantapur students, we used to go whenever there were festivals, and Puttaparthi was 2 hours away. So we used to go whenever there was a festival. And I joined in July of 1990, and in August, we had the Krishna Janmashtami celebration. So that was the first time I went to Puttaparthi as a student. And we also had this tradition of, if it was your birthday, then you could sit for Swami's blessings with a tray of chocolates and yellow rice. And when we were in Puttaparthi, it happened to be my birthday. So I was very excited, and that I had this great opportunity of seeking Swami's blessings directly. And so on my birthday, I was seated along with some 15 to 20 girls, all of us seated for birthday blessings. And Swami came, and in those days it was the sands of Puttaparthi, and it was a beautiful ambiance. And Swami came, and he happened to bless every single girl except me. And I was so thoroughly disappointed because I was looking forward to this so much, and it didn't happen. And I cried bitterly. And of course, my seniors, my friends, everyone said that, you can sit again for the evening darshan, so don't worry about it. So then I sat for the evening darshan, and Swami came, and he made a beeline to me this time. And he said in Telugu, Puddina Chodalede. And then he said that, maybe because you're too short, I didn't see you. So with my height, that was the first time that my height brought me into prominence with Swami. And then he asked me, where are you from? So I said, Bangalore. And then he said, when is your birthday? And I said, it's today. And then he blessed me, and he went. But those few seconds of interaction just transported me to a completely different realm, and I was in total bliss. And that was a moment that I cherish even now. And later on in that academic year, we had the sports meet event in Parthi. And after the event, Swami had come to bless the Anantapur girls. And I happened to be in an event which Swami called out, and then he materialized Vibhuti and gave me. And again, that was the few opportunities that students as girls got. It was a very priceless moment. And when Swami materialized Vibhuti and gave it to me, he said, Andariki ichesai. And I so obediently went and gave the Vibhuti to everybody present there. And little did I realize I hardly got even a speck of it. Later on, when I smelt my palm, I could only smell sand in it. But that moment is frozen in time for me. And the next day, I happened to come across this saying, to whom much is given, much is expected. And that kind of set the tone for me that, I need to give back so much more because Swami has given me a lot. And I flung into the hostel activities, and anywhere anything is required, they could call upon me, and I would do my best over there. And one of those activities that I actively participated in was taking part in the hostel dispensary. And from a very young age, I somehow loved to care for the others and tend to sick people. And so therefore, the dispensary was a perfect place. I learned how to do small dressings and dispense medicines, little knowing how this is going to come of use to me in my later life. So that was Anantapur for me. And after when we were in our first year degree, that's when Swami opened the super specialty hospital in Parthi, and it was a great event. And two of my very close seniors joined the hospital as the first batch of nurses. They were sent to New Delhi, to AIMS by Swami for their nursing training. And believe it or not, both of them were arts graduates, and Swami sent them for a training, and they came back, and then they worked in Swami's hospital. So as my time with Swami and Swami's institutions were coming to an end, I was wondering, how can I stay back? And the hospital seemed like a perfect avenue to stay back for me. And so therefore I thought I will apply, and I always wanted to be a nurse in the operation theater. Um, so I thought this is, even though I'm not a science student, I thought this was a great opportunity. But once I finished my bachelor's, when I came back home, um, I discussed this proposal with my father, and he was very clear that that wouldn't be the course for me. I should pursue a career in the corporate world. Um, what he said to me was, you stand on your own two legs, be financially independent, and then you can do what you want. So that left a deep impression on me, and I decided to, I didn't have a choice, so I just began to do something in Bangalore. So computers were the in thing those days, and I plunged into a computer course, and um, got a job in the corporate world. Well, all this was happening. Swami was very much a focus of my life. And my younger sister, who also did her master's in English in Anantapur, had come back home, and we happened to come across this um, article by Mrs. Phyllis Crystal uh, called "The Inner Voice," and we just read it, and it made an impression on us. And the next day, when my sister was going to college, she remembered the article, and she just asked Swami inwardly, "Are you are you are you really here with me?" And then she heard a voice saying, "I'm always there with you, talking to you, but you don't tune in." And she came back home, and she was very excited, and she shared this experience with me. And then both of us decided, let's try this out, give it a lot of focus and develop our communication with Swami on the inside. So we worked on it, and we were chattering away to Swami throughout the day, wherever we are, whatever we are doing, we would share it with Swami, just feeling that he's listening to us and he's communicating back. And we had some amazing experiences through the inner voice. And for me, that was a beautiful way of connecting back with Swami, because we still did go to Parthi and Vrindavan, but on the inner side, it was a beautiful, cherished relationship that I had with Swami on the inside. And so while I was in Bangalore, one day I was invited to come and serve in a medical camp. Was being organized in Bangalore in a slum. Realized that pharmacy is one of the key departments in a medical camp. And having been exposed to the dispensary in Anantapur, this was a very nice way of being able to serve the community. So I just started, participating in these medical camps very actively, and managing the pharmacy in these medical camps. So much so that I remember when I had gone to Hyderabad briefly, because I had got a job there. My uncle was also, conducting medical camps near his home, and they needed a pharmacist. So I used to help there. And one day they had organized a medical camp in some far off village. And they came looking for me, the organizer, saying, we need a pharmacist and nobody's available. So can you please come? So this training in Anandpur as a dispensary in charge uh, was very useful for me in serving the community while I was working in Bangalore. So the medical camps became so much a part of my life that eventually we were having medical camps 3 times in a month. The first, third, and the fourth Sundays we had medical camps in different villages bordering Bangalore, and we used to dispense medicines for diabetics, hypertensive patients, and of course generic medicines. Um, and when Swami started the hospital, super specialty hospital in Bangalore, my friends said, this is a great opportunity. You've been in the corporate life for so long. Why don't you attend now? And it seemed very nice. But deep within, I knew that I had not yet become economically independent like my father wanted. So, but I still wanted to serve in some way. So I found a backdoor entry into the hospital. I told them that I will volunteer every Saturday, and they could give me any kind of work and I'll be happy to do it. So that's how I ended up being a staff of the Sri Sathya Sai Institute for Higher Medical Sciences, Whitefield. I used to go every Saturday, I started off with creating PowerPoint presentations, then eventually serving in the medical records department, and then later on in the patient's correspondence cell where we replied to patient letters. And one of the key things I remember about being in the hospital was very early on, I happened to meet uh, the surgeon who had come to volunteer in the hospital from AIMS, Delhi. I think it was the very first year of inception. And I was there on a Saturday, and he had sent word for me. So I went to meet him, and then he said, will you teach me PowerPoint? And so I said, but I need something back for that. Um, so he said, what would you like? I said, you should take me into the operation theater during a surgery once. And the deal was struck, of course. And I created the PowerPoint for him, and I, of course, showed him the different features of PowerPoint. And and since I went only on Saturdays, the hospital did not do too many surgeries on Saturdays. But on one Saturday, there was an emergency, and I was there, and there was also a surgery. So this doctor sent word for me, and I got into sterile clothes and went into the OT, and it was an open heart surgery, and the patient's chest was completely open, and the heart was like beating over there. And when I went in, the operation table was so high that I could hardly see anything. So then the doctor called for a stool, and I got onto that, and he showed me the heart lung machine, and he began to explain how the surgery is done, what is exactly happening. And I was so worried, the patient's heart is open, and here is the surgeon explaining to me the intricacies of the functioning of the heart. And it was a great moment because I always wanted to be a nurse in the operation theater. And just being there, I realized that because of my height, I wouldn't have been too successful because you need to stand for long hours assisting the surgeon as a nurse. And with my kind of height, I would hardly be able to see anything. So I consoled myself that way, and I was also happy to serve in the hospital. Um, and that was the the hospital part of my life. So 5 days of corporate career, sixth day was the hospital, and the seventh day of the week was medical camp. So that was life for me, um, being busy all 7 days of the week. Um, And then in 2014, we heard about the subtle phenomenon through Brother Gautam Narendran's email. He had very clearly explained how the darshans happened, and many of us got that mail. I think many of us came to the subtle form through that mail. So Thank you, Gautam brother, for that wonderful mail. Um, so uh, I was not a person who was very attracted to miracles, vibhuti and amritam in different houses. That's something that I never went after. But after reading the mail, a friend of mine asked, do you think you would be interested to go? I don't know what made me say yes. We said, let's go check it out. And it was not very far either. So staying in Whitefield, Mudinhalli was not very far. So we drove down to Mudinhalli. And the very first darshan, we were seated in Anandam, and um, Swami came and he gave his divine discourse. And the discourse for me was very special because the way Swami would speak so fast and hardly allow the translator to translate, um, that's something that happened on that day. Narsimurti sir hardly had any time to translate, and Swami would start off the next sentence. And for me, that was very typical of Swami. And after darshan, he would come on that. After the discourse, Swami would come on darshan rounds those days. So when he came near us, we were three of us seated, and he just looked at us and he said, "Old girls, my old girls have come." And old girls again is very typical of Swami, and we completely believed what was happening. And he said, "Come in batches of 30." So those days, Swami was having the Prema Pravaham batches for the boys, and with that command, the Prema Pravaham batches for the girls also began, and all of us got the opportunity to come along with our families, um, 30 in number, along with family members, and Swami would grant interviews. So during the interview that I was privileged to be part of, I asked Swami about um, continuing in the corporate world. Um, but Swami said, no, 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 you continue to work, you continue to work. But I was quite prepared uh, to give up corporate life anytime because the only dream that I focused on was to work for Swami. So when Swami said, continue to work, I said, okay, whatever Swami's will, whenever he wills, he will call me. So later on that year in 2015, May, Swami asked us to come to Kodai. And we were there as alumni, and Swami called all the girls alumni for an interview. And in that interview, he just looked at me and he said, you have one more year in the world. From this June to next June, you work, and next June, I will call you. I'm building an administration office in Mudinhalli, and you come and take care of it. So I was very happy to know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and there's some way that I can get out of the corporate career. But coming back to my father's, wish that I become economically independent, that had happened by then, and I was, always ready, financially quite independent, and being single, that was another thing that my father wanted. That I'm independent on my own financially as well as emotionally, and I was very much ready for Swami's call. So when Swami said that in Kodai, I was very happy. And that was in May 2015. And in July 2015, we were there with Swami. Swami gave us an audience because we were volunteering for the Atirudra Mahayatnam. And Swami was talking about his mission in the discourse. And after the discourse, after Aarti, Brother Madhu signed to me and he asked me to come to Swami. So when I went up to Swami, Swami gave me a ring and he said, resign your job. So this May, he told me 1 year, and 2 months he said, resign your job. And I was only too thrilled to hear that. And as per Swami's guidance, I resigned in September. And October 9th, 2015, I joined Mudinhalli full time. So it was all the dreams that I ever cherished came true. And the Atirudra Mahayagnam was the first event, and I managed the volunteers for that event. And then the birthday celebrations came on. And after the birthday celebrations, I asked Swami, what should I do next? And he said, you go and help in the administration office. So that's how I joined the administration office here in Mudinhalli. And in those days, there were only three of us, and Swami was going so fast that we were always playing catch up. And there was never enough time to do everything that was to be done. However hard you worked, however long hours you worked, there was always so much more to do. So having been trained for years, working for 7 days of the week, nothing changed for me. I continued to work 7 days, except that it was all in one place here. And I thoroughly enjoyed myself. And about 8 months after I joined, the responsibility of managing the Swami's travel trips abroad fell on my lap. Which meant that I need to ensure that all the members of the entourage got their visas, and the tickets were in place. So I had to coordinate the entire travel. I just knew the dates of the travel, and from then on, I have to start collecting the passports, filling in their visa applications, get their photographs. And having Indian passports meant that you need to get visas for every single country across the world. So it was quite an arduous responsibility. And in those days, Mudinhalli hardly had any network connectivity. So if you come back home, forget about internet, you wouldn't even have data connectivity. I mean, you wouldn't even be able to make a single call. Once you come home, you are completely cut off from the rest of the world. So that was Mudinhalli, so which meant that I needed to stay long hours in office and work through the night sometimes, just preparing the visa applications and making sure that everybody got a visa. And at some point, I began to feel that if the entire trip that Swami went on abroad was completely dependent on me, because if the visas don't come through, Swami cannot even go out abroad. So that kind of stressed me out a lot. And I remember on one occasion I was preparing the visa applications for Swami's trip to Singapore, and I was completely stressed out, and I was working, I think, around 11 o'clock in the night or something. And I was alone in office because the other two members in the office were staff from Bangalore. So they would go back in the evening, but I would stay on and continue to work. So when I went home that night, I just went and sat in front of Swami's chair, and I just gave him a piece of my mind. And Swami, I always related to Swami as a close friend. And I told him that, in Bangalore, I was very comfortable in a corporate career. And I also had my relationship with you on the inside. And I was very happy and I was in peace. But here you have brought me into this place, and then I'm in the midst of a never-ending churn of events. And I also have to do the visas, and it's very stressful. And, I just gave him a piece of my mind. And next day happened to be a Thursday, and Thursday and Sundays were darshan days. And I was still angry with Swami, and I didn't want to go for darshan on Thursday. But somehow I found myself there in Premamritam, and I didn't want to sit in the first line. And while Swami was nearing our row, space gets created, and I found myself in the first line. And Swami came, and I wouldn't look at him. I just looked at him from the corner of my eye. And Swami also was very sweet. He also looked at me from the corners of his eye, and he just threw a rose at me sideways, and it just fell on my lap. And that was, again, a very beautiful experience. And I realized that, of course, Swami knows everything, and he's taking care of everything. And life went on, and that was in 2017, May. Swami was going to Kodai. And along with all these visas and Swami's travel, I also had to coordinate all the logistics for the Kodai trip. which meant staff, students, guests, VIPs, devotees who all were chosen to go with Swami on the Kodai trip. I had to ensure that everybody had some kind of transport arrangement, everybody had accommodation, and it means a lot of coordination and planning. And by the time we reached Kodai, I was completely exhausted. And as we were climbing, going up the hill in a bus, I was, thinking again about life in Bangalore. And I said, what's the point? I think I was more happier. Let me go back. Um, so this was just a passing thought, and I would never take any decisions impulsively. And so I just left it at that. I said, let's see what happens. And we reached Kodai and we had tea, and that very evening we had a session with Swami. And being a staff member, I sat outside the hall because there were so many senior devotees, guests who had come, and obviously they sat inside the hall, and I was sitting in a corner, and I hadn't even freshened up. um, and Swami had come out, and he had gone to the back of the hall, and all of a sudden, Sister Bhuvana called me, and she made me sit in the very first spot next to Swami. The first lady in front of Swami's chair. And the hall was extremely crowded, but I don't know how. But she found a place for me there, and she said, "You have to sit there." I said, "Why are you doing this?" She said, "No, no, no, you sit there." And by the time Swami was already coming, so we didn't have any time for argument. I just found myself in the first row, the first seat there, in front of all the senior devotees. Swami came, took his chair, and then, he said, "Are you all tired?" He asked. So there were mixed reactions from the crowd. Some of them said yes, some of them said no. Then he asked, "Are you all hungry?" And again, there was some no and some yes. And Swami was a little surprised because, honestly speaking, Kodai trips, it's a feast for the soul as well as feast for the stomach. So right from breakfast, we had sumptuous breakfast. Lunch was a feast, and we had reached Kodai, and we had had high tea. And still, Swami heard some yeses from the crowd. He was a little tad disappointed. And I don't know how I just said, "Swami, we are hungry for God." This was not something that was planned. It was such an impromptu. Swami just latched on to that. And for the next 2, 3 minutes, he just looked at me and he spoke. And he said that just like the Chataka bird, which doesn't quench its thirst from any other source of water, apart from the first raindrops, you too should not give up. Having come this far, do not give up. You're at the threshold of God's door. Wait for the door to open. So it was a very important message, and I took it to heart. And that was Kodai 2017. And my challenges were not over yet. Poor Swami. Um, Come 2018, February, March, again, I was in this doldrum of visas and visa applications. Apart from the other kinds of work that administration involved, managing the donations office and doing all ad hoc administrative tasks. And Swami's travel there were so many back-to-back travels, and it meant a lot of meticulous planning, and it was quite stressful. So in February, once again, I was planning for one of Swami's trips abroad, processing the visa applications. And we were also practicing for an alumni drama in front of Swami. And being one of the few alumni in the ashram those days, I invariably got a role to play in the alumni dramas. So alumni dramas meant that staying up late in the night and memorizing your lines, both of which I didn't like very much, um, and also working on the visa applications. So all these were happening, and I was once again quite stressed out. And one night we were having a conversation, some of us together, and that night when I went home, I thought, I think it's time to leave. Once again, this thought was in my mind. And the reason why this was happening was that, I enjoyed working. I'm a workaholic. I love to work, but I wasn't doing any kind of sadhana. Uh, I felt that I was not moving anywhere closer to Swami on the inside. In Bangalore, I had a very active relationship with Swami on the inside, but after having come here, Swami became my manager. He was a taskmaster, and um, you didn't look at him as divine because there was always a lot of work. So I felt that I was missing out on my sadhana, and so that was what was bothering me. Work was not an issue, but there was no inner communication with Swami because all the time there was work, and I didn't have time to communicate with him on the inside. So next morning I was cleaning vessels at home, and all of a sudden I heard this voice inside saying, "You do not have to do any sadhana. You just do namasmarana." And that convinced me. I said, "Fine," and I didn't think about leaving again. A week later was the alumni drama, and we performed, and Swami was very happy with the drama, and he came up on the stage to bless the participants. And while he was speaking, all of a sudden he materialized a ring, and he just took my hand and inserted the ring into my hand, and he said, um, "You work only for me. Do not leave me and go, and do not go anywhere, but work only for me." I was startled by hearing that because after that one fleeting thought, I hadn't thought about leaving. And Swami had told me to do Namasmarana, so I was convinced, but maybe subconsciously something was happening. So he gave me the ring and he said, "Do not go anywhere." I said, "Okay, Swami, I don't know how many more times you have to do this." And then work went on, and this was 2018 March, and 2018 November was when birthday celebrations, and that's the year when the Vice President of India came for Swami's birthday, and and there was also the divine trip. So the three things that were happening simultaneously. One was the birthday celebrations and the Vice President's visit, and 2 days after the birthday celebrations was the divine trip. So I was, birthday celebrations itself means a lot of coordination, lot of arrangements to be made, and a lot of devotees come into the ashram, which means uh, people come to the administration office. So many more people come to the administration office, and and then the vice president, which meant a lot more paperwork, lot more arrangements to be made, and then the divine trip, which had only 600 people. And the divine trip means you will have to coordinate the flight list of two chartered flights, and some commercial flights for all these 600 people from Bangalore to Delhi, Delhi to Mumbai, and Mumbai to Rishikesh, and Rishikesh to Bangalore. So all these were chartered flights, and there were two chartered flights to manage and ensure that everyone on the trip gets at least one opportunity to travel with Swami on the flight. So all these were the responsibilities. And I had to coordinate with all 600 of them. And you can imagine the workload. So once again, I was drowned in work. And, um, and, and in all this, again, I missed the Swami on the inside. Namasmarana was happening, of course, but I was not feeling comfortable on the inside. There was just work and more work and more work. So that year, if you all remember, Brother Madhu sat on the throne on Swami's birthday in the evening. And at that time, I wasn't in Premamritam. I had got a call from one of the senior devotees in the ashram, um, and his wife was undergoing dementia, and he had called me to his house because um the wife had forgotten how to get up and go to the toilet. She was just sitting there, and that was what I was doing when this epochal event happened in Premamritam. And when I came back, everybody was, different. Um, they were all speaking differently, and I didn't know what had happened. And I thought, what's the point in me being here and not even being able to experience all of this? So let me just go back. Once again, the thought of quitting came in. And uh, 25th November was the flight to Mumbai on the Divine Trip, and I happened to be on that flight. And one of the responsibilities is that you have to ensure that everybody is seated on the flight before Swami boards the flight. So, being the person who knew every single person on the flight, I am the last person to board before Swami comes. But on that particular day, for some reason, Swami came quite early, and many of us were yet to board the flight. And Swami came, he blessed the crew of the plane, and then he went in and sat in his seat, which was the first aisle seat on the right. And as we are filing past Swami, obviously you're walking past Swami, so you fold your hands and um, you take Swami's blessings when you're getting into the flight. But I would have none of it because I was extremely angry. I didn't want to look at Swami and I didn't want anything to do with him. So I got into the flight and I was having the boarding pass in my hand, and I didn't look at Swami with any kind of devotion. I just gave him a stare. And Swami was so loving. He said, "What is it in your hand?" He was trying to make a conversation. So I gave him the boarding pass and I didn't tell him anything. He looked at it and then he gave it back to me with so much of love, but I didn't care. So I just walked to my seat and sat down, and I was so happy to put the phone on flight mode because after days, it was finally time when nobody could call me or message me. I was so thrilled. So I just put the phone on flight mode and just went to sleep. And then they served breakfast. I had a good breakfast. And then what happens in the flight is once the meals are served and there's nobody in the passageway, Swami walks through the flight and blesses everybody on the flight. That was what everyone is waiting for on the flight. So I knew this was going to happen, and of course, I didn't want to meet Swami. So I got up, and Swami also got up, and he turned, and I turned back and went to the restroom. And I told myself that I will not come out till Swami finishes his rounds of the flight. And anyway, nobody would want to use the restroom then because Swami is in the passageway. So I went into the restroom, didn't come out for a very long time. And thinking that Swami must have finished his round, I came out, only to see him in the last few seats. He was just approaching the end of the flight. So I tried to hide behind the curtains. And anyway, there were so many people around him, in front of him, behind him, giving him chocolates, taking photographs, the videographer. So many things were happening around Swami. And I thought, anyway, being short again, I would I would be well hidden. And Swami came towards the last seat, and miraculously there was no one in front of Swami, just me and Swami face to face. And I couldn't hide anywhere. But of course, I was still angry. I don't want to uh, talk to him or look at him. So I just looked down. And then he looked at me and he said, "What are you doing?" I didn't answer. So then he just spoke to the person in the last row and he said, "Do you know this girl?" And when he said girl, I immediately remembered Swami, how he might have looked at me as an Anantapur student. That's the memory that came back to me. And then immediately Swami corrected, "Do you know this lady? Um, she's working all the time and serving everyone with a lot of love." And all of a sudden, a chain manifested in his hand, but nothing had changed inside me. And so, when Swami materializes the chain, what would you do? You would put your head down and allow Swami to put it around your neck. But I was too egoistic. I said, "No, I don't want to take it." I just held out my palm, and a beautiful chain, Swami put it in my palm. But when I looked at him, his he was so disappointed. I'll never forget that look. He was so dejected that, he wanted to put the chain around my neck, but I had let him down. But still, I was so egoistic and I was so angry with him. I didn't want to relent. So I said, "Can I take namaskar?" He said, "Okay." And then I took namaskar. And then Swami began to walk back. And there was a foreigner photographer also on the flight. And she tapped on Swami's shoulder and she said, "Swami, Krishna, you photo." And Swami immediately turned back and he said, "Yes." And he was so jubilant. And me and Swami, and I was sulking, literally sulking. And both of us are standing there, and Swami is so bright eyed and cheerful and happy and smiling. And I have such a sulky face. Um, and then Swami went back to his seat. And then I went to my seat and I sat down. And then I looked at this chain in my hand and I realized, oh my God, what has happened? God has materialized this chain for me, and I didn't allow him to put it around my neck. How will I ever wear it? Or where will I even keep it? And how long can I hold it in my hand? These were the thoughts that crossed my mind. And I just got up. I got up and the coast was clear. I just walked up to Swami's seat. He was speaking to the air hostess. And after that, I went to Swami and showed my palm. And I said, "Swami, Mire Veyali, you only have to put it around my neck." And that instant, Swami just grabbed the chain from my hand and just immediately put it around my neck, lest I change my mind. And that look of glee on his face was something that it's still so fresh in my memory. It's so beautiful. No photograph can capture that. He just grabbed it and then put it around my neck. And after that, I decided, come what may, I will stay on in this mission and I will not think about leaving ever again. And thank God, till now I've not thought about leaving again. But the inner journey was still not happening. But in 2020, all of us know what happened. The COVID pandemic struck, and Swami started the Master the Mind series, the Kathopanishad, the Ashtavakra classes, which I was blessed to attend. And things, the perspective changed, the priorities changed. Work was still there, yes, lot of work was still there, but somehow sadhana found a place in my schedule, and and being the Samartha Sadguru that he is. Recently in Kodai, Swami was mentioning about being a Samartha Sadguru. He said, "I'm not only a Sadguru, I'm a Samartha Sadguru because I have not only shown you the way, but I will take you on the path and ensure that you reach the goal of taking a human birth." And that definitely he is doing. And I'm sure many of us have had different kinds of experiences ever since Swami began the Mastermind and Kathopanishad classes. The focus of many of us has changed, and all of us are very clear uh, with the purpose of our life. And I'm sure many of us are marching on with a purpose. And with that, I thank the organizers for this opportunity, and um, pray that all of us uh, reach the goal of our birth, that is self-realization. Saira.
Thank you, Krishnaka. So it was like reliving Anantapur days and Mudanhalli days from 2015, I guess.
Yeah.
No, so the ongoing mission of Swami. Thank you for, literally making it very, very interesting and making many of us very nostalgic about whatever experiences we have had, and we could also relate to some of them. Actually, I should tell you that in many ways, it was actually an inspiration because you were given a piece of your mind to us to march past the world and to march fast with Swami in his mission, holding his hands. Thank you for that. So, currently, as per the statistics, the world is home to more than 1.1 billion girls under age 18 who have the potential to become the largest generation of female leaders and harbingers of change that the world has ever seen. So educating a girl child is so important and relevant to the world at large. Swami, as we all know, has been the beaming champion of supporting the education of a girl child. He said that education given to a girl child is equivalent to educating a family, a society, and a nation at large. If we recollect, the very first institution established by Swami 5 decades ago stands as a royal testimony to this fact. There are thousands of girls who were and are direct beneficiaries to the Sri Satya Sai system of value education, and today they are contributing their bit to the society because of that education that they received at his lotus feet. Thank you one and all for joining us for this session, and we'll meet again next week for the Prema Pravaham. Sai Ram. Thank you.